What's up, guys? Welcome back to another Salt and Pauper video. Today we're going to continue our Pauper set review of the Brothers War set. We're going to jump in with the black commons today. Joining me, as always, is my good friend Josh, otherwise known as Mayo on the internet. What's going on, Josh?
Yo, that's me.
It is indeed. Um, and we're going to go ahead and jump right in. Let's get started. Alright, first up is going to be Ashnod's Intervention. This is a single black instant that says until end of turn, target creature gets +2/+0 and gains when this creature dies or is put into exile from the battlefield, return it to its owner's hand. I've taken point on the last couple of colors, so I'll let you take point on this one. How do you feel?
I am not really the biggest fan of this card. I like the part where it interacts favorably with Unearth, which is a mechanic in the set. But I don't like how you always. This is a card you want to play. You can play aggressively, but you want to play to save the card most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if you're playing this, you're playing it specifically for that Unearth interaction to get that super maximum value. But it does still let you be punished.
Sure. Yeah, I played this in the pre-release or not in the pre-release, but I saw this played in the pre-release as like a combat trick that also buys my creature back. I also saw this used very profitably with the artifact Rager with Unearth, where they would play it, get their card, take their damage, block with it, unearth it, play this on it, attack for 4, draw their card, take their damage, and then get it back to do it again. And it went really deep in card advantage, but yeah, +2/+0 lends me to think that this card wants to be used to like trade in combat. Um, but the rest of this text makes me think that it needs to be like defensive, kind of like a Ranger's Guile, and I don't know. It's just sending a little bit of mixed signals. In most cases, that would signal versatility to me, right? You could use this on offense or defense, but I don't know. If you're ever counting on this card and you have to play it proactively, you're going to feel really bad if they can respond to it.
Yeah, like even if you were trying to play it with a fight card as well, just to
Mm-hmm.
guarantee some fight, some damage from the creature, you could get blown out still from that,
Yeah.
you know. Um, so it's just
Yeah,
yeah.
I pretty much would prefer this in all ways if it was like an Undying Evil variant, where if it was put into the graveyard or exile, you just return it to the battlefield.
Mhm.
Um, I would prefer that in all cases. I think putting it to your owner's hand is kind of cute, and I understand that that's the trade off, so that Unearth doesn't just come back and stay out. But I don't know. This seems this seems reasonable, but I think we have better variants in Pauper.
Yeah, like Supernatural Stamina is the one that immediately comes to mind for this,
Mm-hmm.
and it has the same problems. Um, and it's a cute card. I don't see it much else.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. What's up next? We got Carrion Locust, which is a 2/1 insect horror for 3, 2 and a black, and it says flying. When it enters the battlefield, exile target card from an opponent's graveyard. If it was a creature, that player loses 1 life. What do we think?
Um, I don't know. I'm always very wary about X1s. It is a 2 power flyer in black for 3. It's fine. It does something when it comes in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's enough of a thing that it does, but I mean, it does have the keyword flying, so
Mm-hmm.
it'd be really difficult to not put this in a deck of mine.
Sure. I think Limited in general likes this card. Unearth is a big, big game changer, as well as there's multiple like return from the graveyard or reanimator abilities in Limited that are hyper playable. This kind of is great tech against all of those things, where you can just make sure your opponent's big threat is forever gone. Um, I will also say there is a ton of 2/1s in the limited format that are hyper playable, and this is bound to just be another one of those on the list, I think. Um, I don't see this ever being played in constructed. I think that we have better effects. Um, Rotten Reunion comes to mind for like make a creature exile a card type thing.
Mhm.
I don't know that we have a flying variant outside of like Fairy Macabre, which I would also rather play than this card.
Right.
So yeah, I don't see this making a splash anywhere but limited. But in limited, it's definitely a reasonable card, and I'm happy to have it.
Hmm. I would prefer if it was a separate ability of if a creature card leaves a
Oh
player's
sure,
graveyard
yeah, if it was
as
like a
a
triggered land.
whenever trigger there,
Hmm.
that would allow for some spiciness. But
Yeah, I could see
as it
that.
is right now, it's
That would be a cool
rare.
adaptation. All right. Next up is a reprint. We know what Disfigure is. We're gonna go ahead and skip that. Good reprint, but
Mhm.
next up is Emergency Weld. 2 mana sorcery for a black and a colorless. Return target artifact or creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Create a 1/1 colorless soldier token. Artifact soldier token, worth noting. So it does
All right.
have some artifact synergy.
And it can return an artifact.
Yeah, can return an
Very.
artifact, but it comes to your hand, not the battlefield, so it's not exactly recommission. Um, I've seen this card compared to like, oh, what is it? What is the 2 mana Callous Dismissal? I've seen this card talked about like
Ah.
Callous Dismissal. So in my cube and in many other cubes that run Callous Dismissal, they view it as like another jellyfish, like a mana war, but it's a 2-drop mana war that you can't bounce or can't flicker. So it's a
Mhm.
1/1 creature with bounce a creature on it.
Mhm.
And I've seen a lot of people call this like a mass gravedigger, right? Where it's just a 1/1 creature that you can't bounce or flicker, stapled to a gravedigger ability for 2 mana.
Yeah.
And that changed my perspective a lot on this card. I think I was pretty negative on this card until someone called it 2 mana Gravedigger, and I went, well, maybe.
Mhm.
And then the additive text of being able to fish an artifact back is not bad. I like that it creates an artifact soldier. Um, for kind of the same reasons as Circuits Act and Clowning Around, artifact synergies matter in a lot of places in Pauper, for Deadly Dispute and things like that. So I don't know. I'm more a fan of this card than I thought I would be. I think that if this has a home, it would be in the cube. I don't think this will make constructed play. I think recommission is just straight up better, and I don't think black needs this effect that bad at 2, especially as a sorcery.
I agree. I think recommission is going to be the more impactful 2 mana get something from your grave effect.
Yep.
I 100% agree with the Gravedigger comparison, although I feel like this it's just got a wider range that it can
Mm-hmm.
hit.
Definitely.
And it does something with both a relevant creature type and a relevant card type.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so if this card has a place it can fit, because it does so many things in such a wide um, I guess scope. Um, it it can go places. I don't know if it's good enough in constructed. Um, it is always fun to think about with like one of the well springs, but
Sure.
there's other things that make more artifacts. There's other things
Mm-hmm.
um, that you can do because I don't know if we need to recycle well springs at all outside of like Skyfisher, which actually gets you more of a tangible benefit.
Mm-hmm.
But I suppose this does open a door for like a mono black version of that.
I've heard some talk about people running this in the like Ashnod's Altar Eggstron combo deck,
Mm,
because it's tutorable my mystical teachings, and it lets you get your Mer Retriever back to start the combo after you've self milled it, which is kind of interesting.
mm,
I don't hate that option. I just don't think a 1-for-1 is where that deck needs to be and constructed. I mean, it's running Frantic Salvage for a reason, right? Like, or sorry, this is a sorcery. It can't be tutored by mystical. What is it? It's the Skag, the one that like exploits itself to get an instant or sorcery back from your graveyard to your hand. That's what would get this card after self milling. But um, I just don't know that a 1-for-1 is what they need, especially stapled to a 1/1 creature. I think that they run Frantic Salvage for a reason, and being able to stack your deck with a bunch of things that say draw a card and then draw a card at instant speed is probably better, but we'll see. I would be perfectly okay if this card made constructed decks. I just don't think it will. At least I can't see a deck right now that really wants this type of effect for this cost with this upside. I think Unearth is almost always going to be played over it most of the time. Let's see. What do we have next? Oh, next up is Gixxian Infiltrator, a card we're both pretty excited about. It's a 2/1 Phyrexian human for 1 and a black. And it says, whenever you sacrifice another permanent, put a 1/1 counter on Gixxian Infiltrator. So this is like slightly better Mortician Beetle, but for 2. It triggers off of any permanent sacrificing. So like if your deck runs blood tokens, treasure tokens, deadly dispute, anything like that, you're going to get extra counters, which is great.
Flesh bags.
Yeah, flesh bag's good. Especially with Unearth and, recommissions and stuff. I like the idea of like a black-white sacrifice deck using, supernatural stamina and that kind of thing to like sacrifice and then return things. Maybe you combo that with like a Breathless Knight. There's definitely some play in that sort of deck. I also think this very easily has a home in Black-Green Sacrifice. I think Black-Green Sacrifice loves this card. I just don't think that, and Mono Black Sacrifice obviously loves this card. I think those decks fall a little bit flat in today's metagame just because they don't have a secondary avenue to victory. They're very combat oriented and they don't really have a way to dome you or have reach outside of combat, which is a big problem in today's metagame with people running, like Moments Pieces and Stonehorn Dignitaries, especially with as many people that are testing Flickertron again with Energy Refractor as there are. You can't afford to be a deck that relies on combat to win the game. You have to have a second avenue to victory, whether that's burn spells, whether that's makeshift munitions, whether that's Gary. You need some sort of backup plan. And that deck just doesn't have one. So while I think this is definitely an inclusion in that deck, I don't think it makes it viable.
I think that you could squeeze it in, but if you do, you want Rite of Consumption in there somewhere as well.
Yep, definitely.
That could be the answer to getting around like walls.
Sure. Yeah.
Or things that just don't let you have combat. Just have a singleton Rite of Consumption, maybe 2, if you really need to find it. And my favorite thing about this card is it doesn't fall into the clauses that they've been putting on cards recently, like triggers once a turn or only as a sorcery.
Yeah, no additive text here.
Yeah,
very concise.
There's no limitations on this. This is however much you have. If you can sacrifice it, this thing's bigger.
Yep.
I also think that if you can squeeze a makeshift munitions into your deck somewhere, then this guy gets real big real quick. All of a sudden, you're effectively giving him fire breathing. But
yep. Yeah, if you've got the lands to sacrifice, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like this guy in maybe like a black-red sacrifice deck that works around makeshift and like Flame Blade Artist, the downshifted card from Double Masters 22. Like, I could definitely see that in there. You get to run a red card that we'll talk about later, which I'm excited about, that is also stirring some players up for some mono-red Goblin decks that seem very promising. We'll talk about that when we get there, but that's another card I feel like goes in that deck. So definitely some options and some things to brew with this card, some things to play around with this card, also recommission. Yeah, lots of options here. I think this deck is almost certainly going to see constructed play in some form. I just don't know if it'll be in a top deck or in a fringe deck, but people will certainly play it.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, that's about as much as I have for this guy.
All right. Next up is Gixxian Skullflayer, which is a 2/3 Phyrexian Human Assassin for 2 and a black. It says, at the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 3 or more creature cards in your graveyard, put a 1/1 counter on it. It's not often that we get like a truly free um, like recurring source of growth on a creature. Like if this thing lives like 4 activations, it's an absolute monster, right? Um,
But how many activations does this need? I
as a
think it
3 drop,
really
like
only needs one.
one, maybe two.
Yeah. And then you're happy with anything else it can do, right?
Yeah, anything above 2 is like gravy, right? As soon as this thing can block a Gurmag Angler profitably, this is a monster. Um,
Hmm.
my problem, I think, is that it's a little too slow. In the format we have now, I don't know if you can afford to tap out for a 3 drop. Especially one that's like not hugely oppressive and definitely just dies to a bolt right away. Certainly dies to a galvanic blast for the first, activation and then some. And that's if you're running the self mill deck. If you can slam this on curve and it's activated, you still have to wait a whole turn for this to become a 3/4, which is a great power and toughness, but I think you're really looking at that 4/5 body to be relevant, or at least to dodge the majority of the removal it's likely to have to fight through. Um, I think that while this is promising and it's really close to good, like if I think that if they tuned this card to be good, it would be too good, right? I think this is as good as something can be and not be broken, or at least this
Hmm.
type of effect and not be broken. I just don't think it's quite good enough. I think that in order
Yeah.
to make it in constructed right now, you kind of have to be broken. Looking at Terror and Gurmag Anglers and Overwhelming Remorse, which we'll see here in just a moment. The power per mana spent in Pauper these days has to be very high, or you fall behind on the power scale. And this just feels like one of those cards that would be great if Pauper was still fair, but it's not.
Yeah. This card I don't think makes it into constructed. I don't see it doing enough for, just dying to everything, tapping
Mm-hmm.
it on three, not having any relevant keywords. And you need to have three creature cards in your graveyard, not
Mm-hmm.
just three other cards. It's not like mini threshold.
Yeah.
So you're going to be running a higher creature count, which historically have been less impactful.
Yep.
It's
Although I do
this is
think
not a
people
card to
will be
maximum.
inflating their creature counts a little bit for Overwhelming Remorse just happenstantially. So I think that's bound to be seen for people who want to run that removal spell. They will be having to inflate their creature count a little bit in deck building. So I don't think that's as big a detriment for this card as it may have been in the past, or at least without Overwhelming Remorse accompanying it in the release.
I agree, but
I don't think it's
uh,
good enough to make that sacrifice.
I
I
think
don't think you're making that sacrifice for this.
yeah, I'm of the mind that you need to have more than like 20 creatures for this to be constantly on,
Unless you're self
and
milling, yeah.
some of those creatures need to self mill, like
Yeah.
your Satyr Wayfinders.
Or
Um,
like Stinkweedy Imp or something looking at Dredge.
yeah, yeah. Um, and those
I'd seen people
even
talking
time.
about running this
So
in Tortured Existence, but that deck is crazy slow and recursive, and maybe this, being an inevitable absolute monster is something that deck needs because it does kind of lack an end game, or at least an inevitability, right? The deck's super late game and super slow, and it's stabilizes and just kind of dirtles and gains life and mills cards and does this thing, but it doesn't really have like a huge way to win the game. Like you're just slamming cards, and maybe like Crumbling Necromass and Gurmag Anglers are better, but
I mean, don't get me wrong.
if I
If you're playing this card in that deck, you are playing Crumbling Necromances,
yeah,
and
if
you're
if
most likely
if I had
playing
to
me.
take an absolute like stab at this card and find a home for it, or it wasn't going to be printed, I would probably put it in a Tordex deck. But yeah, I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
think this is going anywhere near constructed. I think it's very close, but I think we're just kind of past where this is in constructed these days.
I agree. It is worth noting. Um, CM is three, recommission, unearth. You could get it back, but again, those are not creature spells, in which you'd have to be running in a creature dense deck.
Yep.
So,
All right. Next up is Gix's Caress. A 3 mana sorcery, 2 and a black, for target opponent reveals their hand. You choose an on-land card from it. They discard it, and you make a tapped Power Stone. This card's very good and limited. Very, very good and limited. I wasn't sold on it until somebody called it Thoughtseize with ramp.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, very good.
Hmm.
I, especially knowing how relevant Power Stones and stuff are on this limited, I think this card is very good in limited. But yeah, 3 mana for a discard that isn't like Hymn to Turok or like Mind Twist. I mean, you just Pauper is way past the point where this is an acceptable mana expenditure. Like you can't afford to pay 3 mana to do this effect. And if
Yeah,
you are, it
I
needs to be Chittering Rats, which is literally only playable because it also has 2 black pips stapled on it.
mhm. Yeah, I don't like this card very much in constructed. Certain it's got legs just because of the Power Stone in the limited formats.
Definitely.
But to make this playable uh, in Hopper constructed, I think you just need to take a colorless off of it. You know, really break it. Um,
I still don't think this would be playable at 2 mana. Single mana for discard, like duress is kind of where you need to be, right? Even with the Power Stone, I think that Power Stone on this specifically, especially the way that Pauper is assembled right now, with like Grixis Affinity being the only thing that can really capitalize on Power Stones, um, this would have to cost 1 black to be playable. And if it costed 1 black, it would be absolutely bonkers. So I understand why it doesn't, but I think it would need to be playable.
okay.
Um, just because even Affinity wouldn't play this at 2. I mean, you're running Deadly Disputes and Reckoner's Bargains and like trying to ramp yourself into uh, like Kenku Artificers and stuff. Like you don't have time to pay 2 mana for that type of effect in Affinity.
Yeah. You can't make it cost less.
No,
I
I understand. I'm with you. I think
There's
it
just
has to
better
for it to
two
be
mana
good.
stuff. Yeah. It'd have to find a home in a different deck.
Yeah,
It
if
really
this
would.
made like a Mind Stone or something, right? Not a Power Stone. If this could be applicable to decks that are not artifact decks in Pauper constructed, 2 mana might be reasonable. But as far as like, because as Pauper is set up right now, Affinity is the only deck that uses this. Uh, one
Fair,
mana
but
is
now,
all they can afford to pay.
and I'm certain you've seen the relevance of Power Stones in the limited format, but
Definitely.
any deck that can capitalize on the colorless portion of it,
Hmm.
and not just an artifact deck, it would take a lot of building constraints
Yes,
when you're making that deck.
and
And
I think part of the problem with that thought line is that while even if this costed 2,
mhm,
and there was a deck in the format that could use Power Stones, it would want more good things that make Power Stones, and there just aren't any.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
So it's
you're bad on
the deck
mana,
is
you're
just
bad on
not where it
restriction,
needs to
and you're bad on critical mass. Like that, yeah, this just there's no way. I don't think
be.
there's not enough support for them at Pauper right now,
Mhm. I
or
think
at least
the
not a big enough payoff as you would need to take the deck building power loss to play these type of cards.
mhm. I don't know what the best discard spell would be on 3. Um, Maybe the one that makes you discard 2 and exiles the graveyard if they downshifted
Mm-hmm.
that. That might be playable just for like incidental graveyard hate.
Nah, the best discard spell right now on 3 mana is probably Lily's Spectre.
Mhm.
Um, as far as like reveals your hand, it's probably the Amass one
Mm.
um, that exiles the card that you choose and gives you a 1/1 token behind it. But yeah, and that's literally only playable in Cube. I don't think this is playable in Cube for the same reason I don't think it's playable in Pauper. It's just that the Power Stone, while they are very good and limited, um, this is not a format that can capitalize on them. And the one deck that can capitalize on them and can capitalize them on very well, like Power Stone's paying 2 mana on any affinity creature is very strong, right? But the deck just doesn't have the slots or the time to like slow down to make Power Stones. It doesn't need it. Like you're getting free Power Stones off your land drops, right? Every land is a Power Stone, so why would you need spells to make them for you?
Yeah, and you just said it incidentally in your last sentence as well. Like, why would you need to slow down to do this thing? And it's just not where Popper wants to be. You don't want to be slowing things down.
Yeah, I'm with you there. All right, next up. Next up is Killzone Acrobat, which is a 3/2 for 2 and a black human soldier. Whenever it attacks, you may sacrifice another creature or artifact. If you do, it gains flying. What do you think?
The Timmy in me wants to break it. But even if you do all the stuff to make everything great with this, you have to jump through more hoops to make it trade with a Skyfisher.
Yep. I will say I like the ability to sacrifice artifacts, especially in format with Wellsprings and Chrome Stars. This has some added value in being able to sacrifice those things. I think that if you built around this card, it's probably okay. But again, I think it falls into the same problem as the 3-drop from earlier that gets 1/1 counters, is that you can't afford to tap out for something that's not like very good. And while this is probably reasonable, I don't think reasonable is strong enough to be in Pauper Constructed right now. It's just not. Like, this is another card that I think would be quite good if Pauper was still a fair format, but we are far from that these days.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that this is an interesting contender for Cube, though. With black-red being a sacrifice theme, with black-green having a graveyard recursion theme, with the ability to sacrifice creatures to give this evasion, which is very relevant in Cube specifically. I think this is a strong contender for those kind of support sections of black. I have no idea what I would cut for this card. I can't imagine there's a whole lot I would want to cut for this card. But if I look through the black pile and I just see a card that I've never seen anyone put in their 40, right? I might give this a shot.
Mm-hmm.
I off the top of my head, I don't know what that card would be, but this is on my maybe list for sure. This is in contention, and I will keep this card in mind.
You know what this would be really fun with is that was it the Butcher's Hatchet from Eldraine, where when it hits you make a food token. But that hits for +2/+1.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not entirely sure if it's common.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, assuming that one's common, then I think both of these would work in Cube.
I think this card could be interesting in thinking about it. I think this could be interesting in the mono black food gates deck that's been showing up on MTGO recently, that runs off of Cauldron Familiar and then sacrificing like golden eggs and ginger brutes to loop the Cauldron Familiar using makeshift munitions and then the gates to like force power through. With the hasty ginger brutes and the 1/1s and stuff. This could be an interesting alternate way to sacrifice foods to get the Cauldron Familiar back. Which is interesting. I don't know that it's particularly good. It's just kind of a last minute thought. It's worth at least thinking about in that deck.
Mm-hmm. Giant Skewer, that's the card.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let's see. What do we got next? Moment of Defiance is a 3-mana instant, 2 and a black. For target creature gets +2/+1 and gives lifelink, and you draw a card. Lifelink until end of turn, not a lifelink counter. And then you draw a card.
I mean, I don't think I'd play this over Unexpected Fangs.
Never, ever. Right?
Yeah. Costing 1 more for to draw a card is great, and the 1 extra power, sure, but there's no way in hell I'm paying 3 for this. This card can't cost less, but it also can't be played as is.
I think it could probably cost less and be okay. It would be good, but it wouldn't be broken. Especially because it still has to resolve to draw the card, right? So if they whiff your target, the spell fizzles, you don't draw your card. I think that this has the same kind of problem as the 2/1 spell from earlier, the Ashnods. where like it falls very much prey to you kind of want to do this proactively, and if they have the response, you feel really bad about it.
Mhm.
Um, in limited, this was probably a very swingy card that changed a lot of combat math, and I'm totally down. But yeah, Pauper's a little past this, and I don't think that the cube has a spot for this card anywhere. Not with Unexpected Fangs in the format. Like that card is just substantially better.
Mhm. Now, if you needed Unexpected Fangs 5, still don't play this card. There's another 2-mana spell with lifelink on it.
Exactly. I would
Um,
consider, yeah, like the. I mean, shit. I would consider like a natural stamina over this if I needed another sort of combat trick like Unexpected Fangs.
mhm.
Let's see. Oh, okay. I mean, this is easily probably the best card from Black. Overwhelming Remorse. 5 mana instant. Now, don't stay with me. It costs 1 less for each creature card in your graveyard, and then it exiles target creature or planeswalker just straight up. No if ands, no conditions. Now, I've seen a lot of people call this like new better cast down, and I don't think that that's correct. I think that there is a meaningful trade off to having this card in your deck and needing to build it with additional creatures. We kind of touched on that with Gixxian Infiltrator, um, and the 2/3 that gains 1/1 counters. But I will say that of all the cards that you might want to increase the creature count in your deck for, this is by and large, and it's not close, the best one. Um, that being said, I don't see a ton of decks in the format right now that would run it. Like, I guess I'll pose the question to you, and then you can start off what you think about it. But like, how much do you have to cast? Like, what do you want this card to cost to feel good about it?
Um,
3,
I want
2?
to cast 2.
Yeah, I want this to cost 2 as well, which means that you
Um,
need 3 creatures in your graveyard to cast this.
yeah, which means at that same point,
Yeah.
Gixxian Skull Flare is turned on.
Yep.
But this, I just, I need it to be at least, um, oh man, not dispute the kill target non-legendary creature. I'm
Cast
blanking on
down.
the name. Yes, it needs to be at least cast down
Yeah,
cost.
I agree.
Costing 1,
Great.
amazing. Just
Absolutely nuts.
dial plus.
Yep.
Um, if it costs 3, I'm feeling bad because I'm giving up like my entire turn.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think any deck I'm playing this in is going to be able to double spell with
Sure.
3 unless I'm playing in
But you
mono
could cost
black
it at 3 if
Pestilence,
you
maybe.
needed to. I just don't think you'll feel good about it.
Yeah. Um, so with that in mind, I would think that I will want 16 creatures in the deck with the ability to either sacrifice them or mill them or
Mm-hmm.
discard them, some way to put them in the graveyard directly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but this card is for sure the best cost 1 less for each creature card in your graveyard effect that I've
Oh
seen in
yeah.
Pop.
Yeah, definitely.
And I
Um,
have to say that entire sentence because there's what, 4 of them now?
right.
Um,
Yeah, for me, I think this card is not quite as good as everybody thinks it is. I think that in the few decks in the format that will play it, it will be an all-star. But I think a lot of people are going to jam this into decks where it doesn't belong, and they're not going to think it's very good. Um, I also just don't like that this card runs into the arbitrary graveyard hate that already exists in sideboards. Like any deck that wants to run this card is using its graveyard as a value engine, which means it's probably following up with like Witches' Cottages or Unearths or that kind of thing, which means that anybody and everybody who's already running graveyard hate in the sideboard or sometimes in the main board, which is everyone in Pauper right now, has game against this card, right? And the one time that you like don't cast this for 3 because you're trying to eke out some value and cast it for 1 next turn, and they play like a Nihil Spellbomb on you, and now it's uncastable because you only have 4 land out, like you're gonna feel awful. Yeah, I think that a lot of people are gonna lose games to not being able to cast this card because they ran into graveyard hate.
and I actually think that it's aptly named for that because that's the
Right.
feeling
Yeah,
you're gonna
yeah.
have if they
Sure.
bog you. It's just
Yeah, so I think in the couple of decks that I think can play this, which is mono black sack, black green sack, if black white sacrifice with Breathless Knight becomes a deck, it can certainly play this. Tortured Existence loves this card. Um, if those kind of decks will think this card is an absolute all star, but I think this is more niche than people think it is. And I think that after they run a couple of leagues with this card in their deck and think that it's absolute garbage because it costed 4 most of the time, is not going to be very good. So we'll see. I will be happily wrong about this card. I already have my playset of foils, so if it is wrong, I'm set. That being said, I think this is probably still the best card in black. I just don't think this is the jack of all trades, jam it in every deck with swamps that people think it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that this is going to be 5th and 6th removal spell.
Sure.
You're not playing it as a 4 of, I don't think.
And even then, with a format with Chainer's Edicts and Cast Downs and Snuff Outs, black removal is at an all-time high, right? You got to be really and if with Defile, if you're running mono black, you really got to be in a spot where you need exactly Overwhelming Remorse, not anything else, just Overwhelming Remorse. And I don't know that spot happens very often.
Yeah, I don't think so either. A Kenku Artificer,
Sure,
to target your land.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, Chainers can do that too if you can kill the Kenku, but so does Defile. Defile answers Kenku very, very cleanly.
Yeah, but I mean, just for something that's indestructible,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
That's the only thing you need exile over,
Yeah.
aside from if they're bringing it back from the grave.
All right. Let's see. Next up, we have Power Stone Fracture, which is a 2-mana sorcery for a colorless and a black, and it says it's an additional cost: sacrifice a creature or artifact, destroy target creature or planeswalker. Why does this have to be a sorcery? I mean, we have bone shards and stuff, right? What is this doing at sorcery speed, and why does it cost 2?
It's because it can target all of the planeswalkers in Pauper.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, this. Yeah.
I think this card is downright unplayable and probably should have been a Bone Shards reprint.
It is notable because outside of Bone Shards and stuff, you can sacrifice an artifact with this, but
there's already one that lets you sacrifice a creature or artifact, though.
There's one that lets you sacrifice a creature. There's one that lets you discard a creature.
There's one that lets you pay 4 mana, and then I thought there was one that lets you sacrifice it. Maybe it's just artifact, not artifact or creature.
Blanking on that one, but
I don't know.
This is the one I know of that lets you sacrifice an artifact or a creature. And
but in either case, this should not be a sorcery.
It costs too much for sorcery effect, or it costs just the right amount for an instant.
Right, that's kind of where I'm at. It should be a 2-mana instant or a 1-mana sorcery, and I think both cases this is not playable.
Yeah. If you do try to use this as a sack outlet, you're getting too cute.
I think for all the same reasons that we just listed about Overwhelming Remorse, this falls into the same competition, right? It's fighting for slots with Snuff Out, Defile, Cast Down, and Chainer's Edict. And it's fighting sacrifice slots with Reckoner's Bargain and Deadly Dispute. This card's never seeing the light of day. Yeah. It's pretty good and limited, though. I mean, you will never not have Power Stones to sacrifice.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Next up is Ravenous Gigamole. What a card. This is the black card of the cycle, the Mill 3 cycle. It's a 4-mana Mole Horror. It's a 2/3 for 3 and a black. It says when it enters, mill 3 cards. You may put a creature card from among them milled this way into your hand. If you don't, put a 1/1 counter on it. So it's either a mill 3, get a creature, or it's a 3/4 for 4 Mole Horror. Limited, this card's fine. I still am very adverse to the among the cards milled this way text. I don't think that needs to be on any of these cards. Except maybe the Archaeologist, just as a restriction, so it's not just a better Archaeomancer. the rest of these, I don't know, man. They feel real bad. I watched a lot of whiffs in pre-release, and yes, obviously you can't kind of stack the deck to make them consistent in sealed, but 3 cards isn't a lot.
Hmm. Yeah, any sort of a self-mill deck that I've wanted to build, I have actually just straight up ruled out mill 3 effects.
Yeah.
Or mill 4 effects that take a card from there.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a
Uh,
reason that things like Grizzly Salvage mill 5, right? It's because 5 is what it took to reliably hit what you want to bring back with it.
and sufficiently fill up the grave, because you're
Yeah.
getting the card
Mhm.
itself, like the sorcery or instant itself
Yep.
in the grave, and the 4 cards you're not picking.
Mhm.
Um, that being said, Winding Way kind of it goes against that choice. Winding Way is just insane. But this, coming back to here, the milling 3, you're either milling 3 for a 3/4, or you're milling 2 and replacing itself in your hand.
Yep.
You're, I don't know if that's enough when you're paying
It's
4
not.
for that effect.
It's not.
And it's just, yeah, it's not something I'm willing to test.
If this was
I'm
a
not
3/3 for 4 with a keyword that mattered, like Death Touch or Menace, and then also had this ability, so it could be a 4/4 for 4 on curve, or get you a creature, as just like a pseudo draw 1 mill 2.
Mhm.
I would be more on board with this, but even if you whiff, it's just a 3/4 for 4, which is below rate. Like, if everything on this card is additive distraction except the 1/1 counters, I want it to be above vanilla rate, and it's not in either case.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. There's no shot this makes it in constructed. I don't think it's gonna do anything in cube. It's just a limited card, which is fine. I think they could have done more with this cycle. What's up next? Oh, Thraxodemon. Interesting card, but almost certainly limited. It's a 2/2 demon for 1 and a black. It says 3 mana, tap, sacrifice a creature or artifact, draw a card. Specifically, another creature or artifact.
Yeah, I'm not the fan of another on these sacrifice effects.
I mean, we have so many good sacrifice we have 2 good sacrifice outlets in Pauper, and then we have some other pay to sacrifice artifact.
I mean, when you look at the name and then the creature type,
Yeah, it's definitely
think,
not
oh
what you
man,
expect it to be.
this is gonna be so good. It's gonna be a bomb. It's gonna be so relevant. And then you look at it and it's a bear
Right.
creature demon. And it's like, hold on. There's got to be something I'm missing in the ability, and you're really not. It's
No.
just pay 3, tap it, sacrifice another thing, and draw a card.
Yeah, I don't think that this should have costed 3 to activate. And if it does cost 3, it shouldn't tap. I think this should be tap sacrifice, or it should be 3 mana, no tap.
I mean, even 1 mana tap sacrifice makes sense in.
Sure, yeah, but I just don't like the fact that it taps itself to sacrifice. It's limited in that way. I think that if it's gonna cost that much mana, it shouldn't tap, and if it's gonna tap, it shouldn't cost mana. But yeah, I don't know. Not a big fan of this card. It's very strictly limited only. It's not gonna be played anywhere else. We have much better sacrifice outlets.
I concur.
Next and last for black is Trench Stalker. It's a 5 mana beast horror. It's 4/5 for 4 and a black. As long as you've drawn 2 or more cards this turn, it has Death Touch and Lifelink. Alright, we could just, this is not going to be played in constructed. It's a 5-drop that doesn't win the game on the spot, and it doesn't even trade with Angler or Terror, but it's not a cube card either, because black doesn't, it really doesn't have that many ways to draw cards. I mean, it has a couple, but it's not like a theme that I'm going to support. So this is a limited card, right? And as a limited card, this card's great. It's 4/5 for 5, which isn't nothing. Even if everything on it is just blank. And then if you ever do hit, a draw an extra card, Death Touch and Lifelink those are 2 very strong keywords in limited.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's a common worm coil, seemingly. It doesn't make you anything but anything else when it dies,
Sure.
but this will mess with combat math and this will halt board states. And your
Oh
opponent
yeah.
never wants to double block this. Even if you haven't activated it yet. As long as you have mana open,
Yep.
they're scared. Because you just need to draw one card on your turn. One
Mhm.
extra card.
Yep.
And that being said, Fairy Vandal looks a lot worse when it's in black.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I would 100% just prefer a Fairy Vandal downshift or even a color shift, something like that.
Mhm.
Drawing 2 more cards this turn. I like that clause, but this isn't it outside of Pauper. I don't think it's outside of Cube either. Not with as much draw that black seems to be lacking.
Mhm.
Because you do want to have like 2 mana spells that draw you 2 cards on your
Mhm.
opponent's turn. So something like
Yeah, you
Thrill
want
of
Deadly or
Possibility.
Reckoners or something.
Exactly. You want
Yep.
something
I'm
so that
amazed
you're
that
all
Deadly Dispute did not get a reprint in this set. Or that it didn't have like, because we have Reckoner's Bargain and we have Deadly Dispute, right? Deadly Dispute makes a treasure. Reckoner's Bargain gains you life. I'm amazed that we didn't have a variant that makes a Power Stone.
um I'm kind of happy they didn't do that.
Don't get me wrong, I don't like the design of the card. We've gotten way too many like, flavor of the week bonuses
No,
variants, but
that would
but
just be a would that be a not a better Deadly Dispute? I think it'd just be like just a slight step lower because you can
yeah.
still just chain Deadly Disputes off of
Hmm.
it. And that's my problem with Deadly. Is you
Yeah,
don't
no,
sacrifice.
I'm with you. I'm just surprised we didn't get it. I mean, a set that cares
Mhm.
about Power Stones, and they've already demonstrated that they are very comfortable in that design phase. Just like, copy my homework but change it a little. Um,
Yeah,
they've effectively copy and pasted that card 3 times now. I'm amazed we didn't get a fourth one that just said Power Stone on it instead of Treasure. But I'm kind
yeah,
of
copy
okay.
and pasted it as an instant. Yeah, there was one sorcery.
Hmm.
Was that from Ixalan? Yeah, it yeah, not a fan of that design space they're in.
Yep, same. All right, guys, that wraps up the black cards for the Brothers War Pauper set review. If you think we power leveled or misevaluated anything down in the comments, go ahead and yell at us. Throw something down there for the algorithm. Make sure you like the video and don't forget to subscribe if you've made it to the end. Obviously, you appreciate the content. It really does help, especially as a new channel. We're still trying to grow, so really, really appreciate you guys for subbing. And we just hit our 200 sub mark, which means that the video after this set review, the top 5 video comes out, we're going to do another token set giveaway, which is exciting. So keep your eyes out for that. Make sure you watch the other set reviews. We've got blue and white already out, and the red, green, and artifact ones are coming next. As usual, guys, goodbye forever. Unless I see you next time. Peace.